Good evening. Good evening. And welcome, to this episode of Pro Wrestling Rally Podcast here, where, as you see in the title, we are going to discuss something that was brought forward, to our company here by longtime industry fan. His name's Chris. Um, 30 plus years, I believe. He's been, following or covering this industry. And he made the claim himself, it's almost his words exactly. He just thinks that fans are just not as hot, for this industry as they were now 20 years ago. And, that really made me think. And I thought it would be a great discussion, for us to have as fans of this industry. And once again, we're going to remind you that there is call in. If you look at the link below in the description of the live video, you'll be able to come on the air, and possibly speak openly about how you feel about the situation. And, you can discuss, your time as a fan of this industry. And my apologies there. We just had a bit of technical difficulties there, but we are back, and we're gonna move forward. I'm just gonna take a quick sip here because we got a lot to cover. A lot to cover, brother. 20 years, of covering this industry is a very long time, and you can look at the names. I mean, there was an article today that was speaking about hundreds of AEW United Kingdom fans, were showing up to celebrate the arrival of Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez before the event even began. And, if that itself doesn't show the devotion that fans have, not only to this industry, but also to the minds that cover it, then really I don't know what else can. So in a way, we are coming off a very celebrated event here, first time, since that monumental New York event where Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan's that Hulk Hogan character, slammed Andre the Giant in front of 97,000 fans at that time. I believe the range is somewhere between 93,000 and 97,000. Detroit Arena. But for a long time, that really was sort of the standard of our industry. And for a long time, a lot of us thought that we may never see anything like that again. And, I'm getting all kinds of messages here. Did you watch Wembley? Did you watch Wembley? I mean, the email inbox for Pro Wrestling Rally here is constantly, almost off the hook in regards to asking me my thoughts on that monumental event. So, first thing maybe I will do is, you know, briefly discuss the results of that all in UK event, which I thought was, spectacular. I'm just looking at the card here, and I'll just give a quick couple initial thoughts. I'll have to also keep my eyes, open on the switchboard here in case we do have a live call in. So I'll just give quick thoughts. We had, I don't think this is in order, but we had Chris Jericho versus this Will Ospreay. A great match. Sad to see Chris floundering, in these meaningless programs when I think, they could really do something really powerful. Look what they have. They have Steve. That's Steve Borden, his Sting character. And you have Jericho, who both, had success, moderate levels between the two of success, up in Atlanta. And that Steve Sting Borden was involved in that major faction based storyline that they did there up in Atlanta. Standing across the ring from Terry Bollea's Hulk Hogan character, did a lot for his career, did a lot for Atlanta at that time. And what I think is, this whole Jericho appreciation thing has just been absolutely floundering, the past few months or longer. Fans are tired of it. And I think they really need, send Jericho and the society out in the ring. And, turn the lights out. Lights go back on. Everybody's kind of looking. And then, then you see Jericho looking up with the mouth wide open, brother. And you see that Steve Sting Borden character up in the rafters. And, you do that for a couple months or however long you need to, build up the heat. And then you just have them do the face to face, with Steve, saying, I don't want what happened in Atlanta to happen here again. And I'd rather much see something as powerful as that than him and Ospreay doing something just kind of thrown out there, especially when it comes to a major card, one as major as we've seen in this all-in program that fans are very hot to talk about. You may be able to say, well, fans are not as hot as they were, 96, 97, 98, but we're definitely at a whole other peak, of heat than we ever have been. All right, let's see what else we have on the card here. Kenny Omega, Hangman, and Kota Ibushi versus Jay White, Juice Robinson, and Konosuke Takeshita. I think this was not again, no storyline here. It's basically just a showcase. It's showing new talent that maybe newer fans or fans returning, to either watch or cover this industry, because of the big event, are learning about. And I just felt that it wasn't a match that was really presented very well. I mean, it very much reminds me, if you were live at Cirque du Soleil and, here's the trapeze act, that's pretty much, there was no story, no build. So we're going to move on from that. I think Kenny Omega is much bigger as a singles performer compared to floundering in these trio tag teams. Of course, heat of the night here for me, coffin match, Sting and Darby Allin versus Swerve Strickland and Christian. Unbelievable performance. I was very emotional, during that match. The whole time they had Steve Sting Borden coming in with this young dude now. I mean, we already know that he's had the absolutely monumental, unrelenting career, 30 plus years now. And here he is, passing that history down to the young talent now. And he took a lot of brutal moves. And, I think we're seeing Steve Stingborden's character, at the peak of his career just only now, you know, is his move style and risk taking, seem to really represent more what I thought the character would be. When I first laid eyes on that Steve Stingborden's character from video games such as WCW World Tour Revenge. Then again, we have the Stadium Stampede, and all I can say about that, names regardless, that was Philadelphia, brother. That was Philadelphia. Basically, that's all I can say about it. I mean, was it great, having that level of match, the brutality, the brawling around the big arena, style match on that level of a card, on that level of an attendance was, one of the more peak moments of the pay-per-view for me. It's always great, to see those types of matches in that environment when we don't usually. They're usually relegated to the house shows or the smaller pay-per-view events. But no, here it was. Here's Philadelphia style, showcased openly, right there in Wembley Arena. Had me very emotional. And you've seen a little bit of Japan in there as well. When we're talking about that FMW promotion, that seems to be very um, based off what AEW seems to be doing up in Florida. We also had CM Punk versus Samoa Joe. You know, I think both names, they did a great opening match. But really than that, they're both more older now. They're more tired. That they seem to really be struggling um, for breath, midway through the performance, and I just thought the whole situation was rather concerning. That's all I'm gonna say. Great opening performance. I think it could have came a little later in the card, with the names that were involved, but it was the opening match. Um, other than that, there's just not much to say. I mean, there was just not much there for me. I mean, yeah, you have the Adam Cole and the MJF and the Young Bucks and all this kind of new generation mumbo jumbo that, original fans just aren't as hot for, in this modern era. And I'll tell you why. Because AEW seems to have this problem quite frequently. They bring in the big legendary names. They'll bring in the Rob Van Dam. They'll bring in the Jerry Lynn. They'll push a program like Billy Gunn and Big Show. And then they'll just completely throw it away. Not even build it up to a pay-per-view program. Nothing. And I think that concept, with fans is getting very tired. It seemed that we were building maybe towards a Tommy Dreamer or Bully Ray program. They did their thing in Orlando, not too long ago, but I think the Bully Ray, was extremely hot. Mark, I believe, is the real name. I'm not. I don't know if that is true or not. But he, came out publicly and was saying that he really thought names like Dreamer and Bully Ray would really do big numbers up in Florida, and I absolutely think they would. I'd love to see it. Nothing had me more emotional almost in the year of this industry as that promo between the Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer that we discussed before. Tommy Dreamer was right in Bully's face saying, "You don't talk about the mother." throwing his jacket down on the floor. And, that was emotional. A lot of fans, younger fans, are just sort of saying, who are these old guys now? Where is the young bucks? Where's this guy or this? But no, for us original fans who were there, through the Philadelphia years, that was a powerful program. And I think they were also at one point teasing the idea of Eddie Kingston and Bully Ray, working a program up in Florida, which I think would have been something really different to put on the cards, and I would have very much liked to see that. Now that he's really perfecting that heel character, Ray. After all these years and all these different promotions, I mean, he floundered a bit, during the end of the Dudley run, but he really started to find his place, within this industry within the last decade or so. We'll also talk about these inside scoops regarding Philadelphia original Rob Van Dam. Now, he is one of the most influential, I think, talent in this industry. A lot of fans didn't want to see him. A lot of fans were calling for him. I was one of those fans. I've been saying for almost a year now, I tweeted it out to Tony himself saying, if you bring in those Philadelphia boys, only good things will happen. And little beknownst to me, that's exactly what they were doing. It seems to have been put a stop to, but they brought in Rob, and he worked an absolutely unbelievable match, for this stage in his career now, to work like that, to go back to that Philadelphia style, working with one of these young dudes now who's just hitting his peak in this industry. I mean, it was very emotional for me. And then, Wembley comes up, and where's a name like Rob? I mean, they could have done the Rob Jerry Lynn payoff. And I think a lot of fans would have very much liked to see a match like that on the card, because it's something we haven't seen now in, almost 15 years. And, I think that's what AEW does very well. It takes you back to those peak days of New York. It takes you back to those cool fall Philadelphia nights. It takes you back to those hot summers of Atlanta. It takes you to Japan. And it really harkens back those memories that I think a lot of fans have. That's, I think, what AEW is doing very well right now. But I got to give credit where credit is due. I've been starting to watch the WWE, that New York company, their NXT programming. And one thing I got to absolutely say is when you watch those cards, I mean, this is where the in ring production of New York really comes through here. And I hadn't seen anything similar in almost 10 years, and it became clear to me very quickly that that Monday Night Raw program, that's the entertainment. But if you tune in to that NXT program, that's where you're going to see in ring work, really at its peak. And I very much enjoyed that. I thought it was very refreshing. And even The Rock's daughter now, was featured on that program, cutting an interview, and good God, I mean, such a different character than anything that the father, has ever done. But brother, you hear her speak, and just there's those brief moments where you're listening to the Father, and I thought that was very powerful. I think that the daughter now will have a very powerful career, going forward, you know, in this industry. And I think that's a reason for longtime fans to be very hot right now. You know, I had no idea that the daughter now was even featured in the company, let alone on a whole separate show. I see fans. I'm just going to give it to an original here, OG 247365, openly, saying, Sting is still that guy. AEW need to give him a push. We could have Sting Cage, we could have Sting Jericho, we could have Sting MJF. And I very much agree. Those are programs. I think Sting, besides this tag team stuff that he's been doing, I think there really is a chance for a program there, and it has to be with the right talent. But I'm sick of seeing these sort of floundering tag, hardcore matches, as exciting as they are, and I would much rather see Sting, in something one on one, to close out the career. But I want to hear from the fans. You tell us why aren't the fans as hot as they were 20 years ago? Or at least that's what longtime industry follower Chris was saying. And I'd love to hear from the fans. But as for this episode, that is